All right, everyone. Good morning, commissioners, everyone here. In accordance with the Open Meetings Act, the Texas Government Code, Chapter 551, the public notice published by the Secretary of State, this in-person open meeting of the Commission on State Emergency Communications is hereby called to order on July 31st, 2024 at 10 a.m. Our first order of business today is to certify our quorum, and part of that will be to welcome our newly appointed Commissioner, Richard Muscat. Richard comes to us recently after having retired from Bear Metro 911, where he served as their Director of Regulatory Affairs, and has also been an active member of the Texas 911 Alliance, is their Director of Regulatory and Legal Affairs as well. He has over 30 years of experience, and we're happy to welcome him today. And so right before we certify our quorum, we're going to go ahead and swear him in and make him official, if that's okay. So, Richard, if you'll come join me, we'll administer your oath.
I think he's actually, oh, no.
All right, if you'll raise your right hand, do you, Richard Muscat, solemnly swear or affirm that you will faithfully execute the duties of the office of Commissioner of the Commission of State Emergency Communications, an agency of the state of Texas, and will, to the best of your ability, preserve, protect, defend the constitutional laws of the United States and of this state, so help you God?
I do.
There you go. Well, you're official, Richard. Congratulations. Stacy's going to notarize him because it's not official until the notary stamps it. All right. Now, if we'd been really good, we'd gone over to the archives, Patrick, and got them to give us the Sam Houston Bible and done that right. There you go. All right. That being said, this morning we have all of our commissioners present with the exception of Sue Brannon and Lucille May, so quorum is present. Is there a motion to excuse those commission members not here today?
So moved. Van Steenberg.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Are there any opposed? The ayes have it. All right. Now, Richard, as we normally do with new commissioners, this is your chance to say a few words and address the crowd. So we would open it up to you.
First, I'd like to thank the Lieutenant Governor for the opportunity to serve, and I look forward to working with everyone on the commission and the 911 community. Thank you.
All right, super deal. All right, we'll move along to our agenda now. The first thing up is future meeting dates. Andrew?
Thank you. So we have a quorum set for September 25th, 2024 for our next commission meeting. And we're currently looking at availabilities for November 20th or potentially December 4th for the meeting after that to get around the Thanksgiving holiday.
Okay, not December 25th, what we're talking about this morning in the meeting, because that one's going to be a problem. But there you go. All right. Any questions or concerns on those dates?
And Karen will be reaching out to folks to firm up the quorum for the November or potentially December date.
Okay, good deal. At this time, we would open it up for public comments. If anyone wishes to comment on a particular item, you can do so by stating your name, and we will recognize you. You can speak at this time. If you would prefer, you can make your comment when that specific agenda item is called. Is there any public comments at this point? There being none, then we will move on, and we'll now take up our normal agenda, beginning with agency operations.
All right, I'm up first as part of the Executive Director's Report. I just have an update on our third quarter 2024 performance measures. Everything's mostly on track. As you can see here, percent of time for 911 services are available. We've met our target. Our 911 calls received by PSAPs is on track. We're right around 1.8 million calls for the year so far, with a target of 2.8, and we obviously still have a quarter to go. For our poison program, services available is up, and we've met a target. Our calls are a little down. You'll see we've only had to date about 285,000 poison calls, with a acceptable range a little bit below that. Obviously, the poison calls is a reactive service, so we serve the Texans that call, and that is how they handle that. So it's a little bit of a reactive number. I do want to note that the average cost per call, you'll notice, is significantly higher than our quarter 2 report. We reported about $12.74 per call last quarter, and it jumped to $32.16 for this quarter, and that's mostly due to some delayed payments out of one of the poison centers. So billing, we essentially had double, I don't want to say double billing, but we had quarter 2 payments come through in quarter 3, which kind of made that number jump so high. But regardless, it'll settle out through this next quarter. So no concerns there. For our non-key performance measures, we talked about this in our strategic alignment committee meeting this morning. I just kind of want to make folks aware of this, but one of our non-key performance measures is number of reported 911 network outages that exceed 2 hours. So when we're talking about network outages, this is outages that happen on the OSP side before it goes into the core and EZNet. The number is extremely high. You can see it's literally double what the target is. Most of that is due to the growth that Texas has had over the last couple of years. So this is fiber cuts that are happening due to construction. This is natural disasters, sinkholes that took out a fiber line in one of the regions, things like that. So this number, it's listed as a network outage, but as everyone knows, the network, the 911 network itself is redundant. There's contingencies built in for ways for people to still call 911. So you can have essentially the top line network still happening, but if you have a fiber cut at that local level, it's a localized issue where people might be able to tap into that 911 network. So again, it's something we're watching. We want to work with some partners. We had good conversation this morning about doing some awareness or prevention with folks that are in the kind of construction road business type thing to see what we can do to kind of help mitigate that, because it's a pretty significant number, and obviously we want to make sure that services are equally spread out and available to everybody. So that is all I have for my report. Any questions?
Okay, well, up next we have item number 2, which is consider for approval the agency strategic plan for statewide 911 service for fiscal years 2025 through 2029, and Heather is going to provide that. But just as a note, I think she took 2 plans this agency had and combined them into one, so this is a landmark day in Texas state government. Heather?
Efficient. Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Heather Barnes, Director of Programs, and you'll notice I'll be up here several times today. I blame Patrick for the extra steps. I'm in multiple places throughout the agenda. So if you'll please turn to page 9 for this statewide plan. Staff has developed the proposed statewide plan in collaboration with ECAC and the Legislative Working Group. The proposed plan contains all the statutory elements. Because progress has been made statewide towards Next Generation 911, the CSEC Next Generation 911 Master Plan was incorporated into the statewide plan and will no longer be a separate document, as Chair Beecham mentioned. The major changes to the document, besides incorporating the 2 together, include updated information on 911 entities in the state, the latest FCC survey, and the transition timeline and tracking progress of each 911 entity's NG 911 implementation. The proposed plan accompanies the staff report, and Commission staff requests the Commission approve the strategic plan for statewide 911 service as proposed and delegate to the presiding officer final authority to approve the plan for submission. Any questions?
Anybody have any questions? Y'all have done a really good job on this, FYI. Anybody could make a motion if they don't have any questions.
Van Steenberg will second with the statement that yes, I think it's a well-written plan and appreciate the staff's effort.
There's a motion and a second and a nice compliment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. The ayes have it. Thank you all very much. Heather, good job. Next up is our appropriation year 2024 financial update with Lorraine.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Lorraine Meek. I am your Chief Financial Officer. On page 38 of the Commission Meeting Notebook is the agency's 2024 financial update. As of June 30th, 2024, 83% of the year has elapsed. And this is informational. No actions are needed. And this is specifically for the general revenue and general revenue dedicated. The top section is expenditures. Per the GAA, the General Appropriations Act, we were appropriated $64 million. And so far, the amounts that have been expended and accrued total $61 million, which shows us that we have a balance presently of $2.9 million of unidentified as committed funds that we can still make actions on. And the second part of the expenditure section shows the breakout of what is general revenue and general revenue dedicated. Now, of the available balance, 4.5% of that appropriation is what is left over, and of that amount, 82% of it relates to the 911 network operations and equipment replacement. In the revenue section, I'm going down the total revenue sections column first. For 2024, we have over $1.4 million of prepaid wireless, $18.3 million of regular wireless, and $3.3 million in landline service fees, for a total of almost $23.1 million in service fees. Additionally, we have almost 18.7 in equalization surcharge, bringing us to a total of $41.7 million in revenue. In total, the revenues reflect $2.8 million less than the GRD appropriations, which would require use of fund balance. And with the amount in the top section of appropriation balance for GRD, we are only $2.25 million of appropriation that's utilizing fund balance. Now, as we go across to the total receipts to date, for 24, CSEC submitted the BRE and the comptroller reported $50 million for the biennium, and with revenues totaling 41.7, revenues are just over $364,000 so far of what we were expecting, so yay. Now, regarding fund balance, we're healthy now. I will say this. Surcharge, we are expecting a little bit of a decrease from what the balances were in 23, as we are fully utilizing the revenues that were expected. And for service fee, it actually is increasing because of lapsing prior year appropriations that were not utilized. For example, the capital project funds that ended as of August 31st of last year. We got to lapse those funds, and the revenues are coming in a little higher than we were originally expected. But that is all I have for this financial report. Again, no actions are needed, but I am here for questions.
Any questions for Lorraine?
I'd just like to add something real quick. So when we're talking, we see that service fee fund 50/50, and we have a fund balance of $39.1 million, that doesn't take into account $22.2 million that's going to be deposited into that fund related to the COGS portion of the broadband infrastructure fund appropriation. So when we're thinking about our 50/50 fund balance, a more accurate number is closer to $61.3 million in that fund.
Yeah, I was going to say, in that transfer wouldn't occur until When would that transfer occur? Conceivably.
We have the agency has the ability to make the transfer at any point. So we'll be transferring that balance over as we need it for funding the COGS project. Because right now that money is sitting in the Next Gen 911 General Revenue Dedicated Account 0195,
Yeah.
where it accumulates interest. So we'll deposit that over.
But we wouldn't deposit that over till we have the authority to spend that.
Correct,
So,
yeah.
so conceivably, that would occur maybe in the next session, so it's gonna be a while.
Yes.
I think one thing that might be helpful on this, just for grins and giggles, is if we added another thing here that just denotes that account and ongoing interest accumulated there in it. That way we know it's out there. I know it doesn't necessarily fit into our normal appropriation cycle and all that. It's just a separate little thing over there to the side. But I think that's good, just so people are aware of that. And it's good. I mean, you're accumulating interest. We love that. That's a handy thing. And there's a lot of people in this room that will love that. But just that way so commissioners can see it on that update.
We'll be happy to add that in.
All right. Anything else? That report is just informational, so if there's not, we'll move on. But Lorraine is up next for the annual consideration of our rates set for Regional Planning Commission 911 Emergency Service Fee, Landline and VoIP, and the statewide equalization surcharge. Lorraine?
Good morning again, and still. We're continuing on to page 39, and we'll discuss the topic he just said, because it's really long. Per Commissioner Rule 255.1, the Commission must annually review and adopt by order 911 emergency service fee and equalization surcharge. Service fee is currently set at the maximum rate of 50 cents per month per non-exempt line. This rate has not changed since its inception. Surcharge is currently set at 6 cents per month per non-exempt line, and with the maximum rate of 10 cents. Starting at the top on page 40 is of the first table. It shows the service fee and surcharge revenue for fiscal year 2023 was $52.3 million, and the second table estimates fiscal year 2024 service fee and surcharge revenues to come in around $53.2 million. This estimate can only fund a portion is what is needed to maintain the current levels of 911 service programs and continue the transitions and maintenance for the Next Gen 911 program. The remainder comes from general revenue and fund balance. Equalization surcharge. The notebook shows, this is on page 42, shows that the past 12 months surcharge revenue was almost $24.8 million. The analysis shows that as we remain at 6 cents, we will have an excess of $250,000. But if the commission did decrease it to 5 cents, we will have a decrease of revenue of $3.9 million. Staff recommends the landline VoIP 911 fee continue to be set at 50 cents for fiscal year 25 for the entire state 911 program service area. Staff recommends the statewide equalization surcharge to continue to be set at 6 cents per month per non-exempt line, exchange access line, equivalent local exchange access line, and non-prepaid wireless telecommunication connection. A draft order consistent with staff's recommendation rates has been provided to the Commissioner's presiding officer for signing. Any questions?
Any questions for Lorraine? All right, well, in that case, we would entertain a motion to approve those rates.
Guerrero, second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Lorraine, you've skated through again. Good job. All right, now we're on to the exciting business of considering for approval our legislative appropriation request for fiscal years 2026 and 2027 And kudos to Andrew. He just got it this morning, and look, he's ready to go already.
So up for consideration is the agency's legislative appropriation request for fiscal years 26 and 27. The LBB, in their ultimate wisdom and impeccable timing, released to us our base budget at about 7:30, 8 o'clock this morning, which I now have in front of me. But good news is that, essentially we attempted to essentially just come up with our own base based off of what the agency's expenditures were for 2024, as well as what was budgeted for 2025, which is essentially the same formula that the LBB uses in coming up with a base for our general revenue pot and then our general revenue dedicated pot. Our numbers between the LBB differ a little bit, so we're short about $137,000, which when we're looking at a base request of $128.9 million, that's 0.1% of the entire budget. So I think Lorraine did a fantastic job in projecting out what our base is. So as part of my recommendation here, before I give a little bit more context, is that I'm going to ask that we reconcile to what the LBB base is, and then have ultimate authority to the presiding officer to review that reconciliation before we submit it to the LBB. But first off, just some general context here. So the legislative appropriation request is a process in which all state agencies have to go through prior to the upcoming session, where essentially the agency is given its base budget for the upcoming biennium, and then we have to balance that out across the different strategies within the agency. CSEC takes an approach through the legislative working group to kind of come up with our base budget. So starting in early spring, we have 901 and our poison programs reach out to our local stakeholders, the 901 COGS, as well as the poison centers, to start building up their requests for the next biennium. So we take their requests, we take their needs, their exceptional items, take our base budget and try to make it essentially all fit, and then present it to the legislative working group for their ultimate authority approval to the commission. So through that process, we feel that the base budget is a little insufficient. So we have 3 exceptional items that we have on the table for the commission to consider as part of our proposal. None of the 3 are requesting additional general revenue. They're all related to our general revenue dedicated accounts. So I just want to make that known, that we're not asking for general revenue, we're asking for dedicated funds. So our overall base appropriation is on page 44, which in the notebook, it's reading 128.9. Our new number is actually about 128.8, and I'll get this stuff out to everyone just so y'all see it. So it's reduced a little bit. But I think our exceptional items, that difference, it's so negligible that we're going to make it up through the internal budget. But I think most of it's going to come out through the wash, because we're asking for exceptional items in those same strategies that got reduced for our general revenue dedicated. So I think our plan going forward is pretty solid. Our first exceptional item request, again, is going to tie back to that broadband infrastructure fund for the COG. So we're asking for $5 million, $2.5 million per fiscal year, to be added to our A11 strategy, which is essentially the funding that goes to the COGs for network operations and equipment replacement, and we would continue to use those fundings, that additional money, in accordance with our Rider 3 equipment replacement schedule. This number, so as I mentioned earlier, the total deposit for the broadband infrastructure fund was $22.2 million. We're only asking for $5 million of that. Essentially, we went through a process of looking at the COGS needs, looking at our 10-year equipment replacement schedule, looking at current fund balance, looking at revenues, and ensuring that our exceptional item number keeps us financially solvent. We don't actually want all 22.2 right now because we don't have that many needs. So this $5 million, we've projected out that'll maintain a healthy balance in that 50-50 account to at least 2037. So that's 12 years from now. So we feel that that's a pretty financially conservative number that meets the needs, brings in some additional funding to the regions for their equipment needs. And again, like I said, our goal is to ensure that we have that long-term healthy balance in that account. Second exceptional item, it's a very specific exceptional item request to the Permian Basin Regional Planning Commission. As we've talked about many times at earlier meetings, the Howard County ECD dissolved and joined Permian Basin. So we're asking for an exceptional item request that essentially accounts for that population difference for the revenue to go to the Permian Basin. So that comes out to about $380,000, $190 per fiscal year, and that would just essentially go into the Permian Basin's contract with us. And both of those, again, would be coming our requests out of our 50/50 general revenue dedicated account, which is the wireless 911 service fees. And then finally, our third exceptional item is tied to our poison strategy. We're asking for $2 million for $1 million per fiscal year. This is to ask for actual revenue that is being generated out of that equalization surcharge, and this will go directly towards operational and maintenance costs associated with the Texas Poison Control Network. We have licensor costs, equipment costs, subscription costs, cloud-based network costs. There's a ton of IT costs that have just skyrocketed over the last couple of years, and we're continuing to see those numbers go up. So we're asking for our actual revenue. So this account is generating this revenue. So we're essentially asking for just our actual revenue in that equalization surcharge for the purposes of bettering our TPCN, our Texas Poison Control Network. So those are our three exceptionals in addition to our base. It essentially comes out to about $136.3 million for our total request, which is that 128.8 in base, 7.38 in exceptional for that top dollar amount. We have some minor reconciliation that's $137,000. Again, it's a negligible amount. It's 0.1% of our budget, and I feel confident that we'll be able to make it fit. And I think, again, a lot of it's just going to kind of come out with the wash in the exceptionals that we request, assuming they get approved. So any questions on that? Oh, lastly, and then again, our recommendation, the executive director recommends that the commission vote to approve the legislative appropriation requests and delegate authority to the executive director and the presiding officer for final authority to approve the LAR for submission to the Office of the Governor and the LBB.
Questions? Andrew, one thing, because you mentioned this, you were talking about a healthy balance in 50/50. What do you consider a healthy balance in that 50/50 account? Lorraine, don't laugh. That's not nice. We can haul you up here and ask you that question again. So,
a healthy balance is enough to support the program through the next biennium. So looking at essentially if we can get through 2037, we'd still have enough funding in that account to cover that biennium that we'd be going into.
okay. It's my esoteric question for the day.
You can ask me that in 2037.
There you go. I won't be here in 2037, so that'll be great. Somebody else can ask that question. Please.
To turn that? Okay. So this is kind of exciting to me that this is the case, right? I mean, we've had a number of years where we've scratched our heads and tried to say, where are we going to get this money? And so, yeah, somebody's doing a good job helping legislative folks see the need, and they've made it a priority. And so, yeah, I just want to say kudos to you guys for doing a good job of making that awareness there, however that's taken place. And so, yeah, to be under 200,000 from what we put together for ourselves, that's an excellent job on y'all's part. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's interesting. So when Lorraine was talking about our fund balances, equalization and our 911 wireless, when you take into account that deposit of GR, we're going to almost have more in our 50/50 account than our equalization account, which I don't think has ever happened in many, many, many years. So, the legislature has made two large, significant investments into Next Gen 911. A lot of that was done through advocacy work through MECTA, 911 Alliance. So we obviously appreciate the work that they do in spreading awareness with the legislature. We originally got initial federal money, ARPA dollars for $150 million, and that was followed up in this recent session for another 155.2. So our legislature has put forth over $300 million into the 911 system across the state over the last 4 years. So that is a significant investment.
All right. Any other questions? If there, just as a note, so we're asking to delegate authority here, and we've done that, I think, the last couple go-rounds in this, so I don't think there's anything new there. If people feel uncomfortable with that, we can always have one of those remote meetings. I know Patrick's probably cringing up over there, in August, but if not, then we can just delegate authority and move forward. And since this is a pretty small amount, we'll either, Andrew can work some numbers magic, or we can have a bake sale and cover it, so I think we'll be good.
I know our legislative working group has gone over and over this, and we've talked about it. We've talked about, all the different scenarios that could come back from the LBB. So I feel very comfortable in allowing, staff to move forward. And we've even had the discussions that if we have to reconvene the legislative working group just to have some questions or go over, we have that option. But I certainly support this, and good job on this this presentation. And so Scaro makes a recommendation to approve the fiscal year 26-27 legislative appropriations request and delegate the executive director to have final authority to approve the LARs to be submitted to the LBB and the OOG.
Sorry,
There's
a
a motion.
second.
There's a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. The ayes have it. All right. On to the next one. I believe we've got Noah for our Proposition 8 Broadband Infrastructure Fund update. Noah?
Good morning, Commissioners. Please turn your attention to page 48. This will be the first update that we have on Proposition 8 since we approved the certification and reporting process back in March. It is informational only. I'm not asking for any requests for action today, but just wanted to provide a few details here so far. We have received most of the certifications from the 772s and municipal districts. We are still outstanding a few. That being, we have one 772 ECD, Texas Eastern 911 is still outstanding. And then we have 6 municipal districts, City of Ennis, City of Glen Heights, Kilgore, Lancaster, Mesquite, and Sunnyvale. As an update, as far as the amount that we've distributed thus far, we have distributed $132.6 million out of that 155.2. So pretty significant that we have been able to distribute the funding out to the districts as we are able. I do have an attachment that is on starts on page 50 that goes over more detail. There was some note earlier with one of Lorraine's reports on the interest accrued in some of these. And so you will actually see that on page 51 for the RPC allocations for this, the 22.2, there is currently a little over $250,000 in interest that is accrued for that purpose. And with that, I will sit for questions.
Any questions for Noah?
Man.
You bet.
So I was pleasantly surprised that we got our distribution in July. I thought it was coming in September. What was the reason for the quicker?
So we, in order to, as soon as we received certifications from folks, and once we accepted them, then we had decided that we would either distribute the full amount depending upon a dollar threshold. So if a district was to receive more than $1.55 million, we would cut that up into 2 disbursements. If you had less than that one, then we distributed the full funding at that time of the acceptance of the certification.
Right. Thank you.
So that was a good thing, right?
It was a good thing. I was
There you
just surprised in a good way.
All right. Any other questions for Noah? Well, good job on that. And then we'll keep Noah there because he's going to give the update on the Next Generation 911 Fund grant program.
Sure. If you'll direct your attention to page 52. I do have a couple of updates as far as some of the newer folks joining the program. We did execute a contract with the City of Hutchins at the end of May of this year. So you'll see on the next page, they're still showing a 0% expended, but they're new. So that's to be expected. The City of Ennis, we have received their paperwork. We've been working with them extensively over the last month or so. We're waiting for a couple of more items to be updated, and then we should be able to get a contract out to them for execution. So far, we are sitting at $65 million expended out of the $150 million for SB 8. That's represents 43% expended. We are sitting at about 53% of the time elapsed, so we are closing the gap. It's been getting closer and closer. There are still 12 districts that are showing zero. We will be following up with those, two of which are the City of Ennis and Hutchins. We'll be following up with those entities on a periodic basis to ensure that we can start drawing down those funds. Moving on, we are in the middle of monitoring. We have completed the monitoring of the 7 selected regional planning commissions. There was 1 preliminary report that was sent out. 6 were final reports with just some observations for some equipment items. Just notating on keeping up with how it's inventoried for federal purposes. But that has since been remedied from Nortex, so we have now sent out a final report for that. We are also currently in the process of monitoring the districts as well. That is still ongoing, and I do not have an update there. Hopefully we'll have an update in September. I'll be providing the full report of any observations and findings. This report is also informational, but I do continue to sit for questions.
Any questions for Noah? Good job, buddy. Thank you. All right, we'll move along. We've got Bulldog Patrick Tyler over there for the Texas response to the Federal Communications Commission Annual 911 Information Collection for calendar year 2023.
Boy, that's a mouthful, and I wrote it. Good morning, Commissioners. Patrick Tyler, your General Counsel. If you would please turn to page 61. This is an informational item, so no action is required or requested. And we've been going through this for those folks who are relatively new, not Commissioner Muscat, because he's quite familiar with this. We've been doing this since 2008, starting with calendar year 2009. And this is part of the Net 911 Act of 2008, where essentially Congress directed the FCC, because they'd heard enough about diverting of funds and concern about diversion of 911 funds for non-911 purposes, directed them to start filing an annual report with Congress and highlighting in particular jurisdictions, whether it be a state or a community 911 entity or authority within a state that were diverting funds. Now the strings that go along with that if you are identified as diverting, no immediate ramifications. If there's ever federal funding for Next Generation 911, there could be, because there's this requirement to certify that you've provided the information to the FCC so that they can do the report. Long way of getting around to that this is not a fun task, as the folks who have participated in helping CSEC with our FCC response and our questionnaire, it is a thankless task. It's a lot of effort. It requires for particularly municipalities in particular, because they have what I call end-to-end cost, whereas for the CSEC state program and your statutory ECDs, they are literally or singularly 911 focused, so it's a little bit more easier to define and delineate the costs that you cover, because they literally are related to 911, whereas a municipal ECD is going to have all the way the cost all the way down to including emergency response. And the reason why that's can be relevant is as part of the FCC was also instructed to pass regulations regarding what is an acceptable or allowable or disallowable use of 911 fees. So they did that in 2021. And the importance of that, which I try to stress when we do this response, is keeping in line with that, as said, as certainly as the executive director, we've had conversations about the FCC's 911 rules are literally there to protect and to ensure that 911 fees are utilized for 911. We recognize the importance of ambulances and police cars, et cetera, but they're not 911. So that was truly Congress's intent, and that's certainly the FCC's intent. So while the response is time-consuming, it's relevant in the part what I like to convey is helping districts in 911, Texas 911 authorities, and also nationwide, go to their folks and say, this is federal law that these fees be used for these specific purposes. And us being in the 911, we like that. But it doesn't take away from the time involved in taking to prepare this response. And I'd like to single out some folks in particular, because this one will be my last one, as folks in the agency know. But Crystal Carreau with the City of Richardson, and Susan Carr with the City of Plano, Kelly Hall with Highland Park. They're all part of the Municipal Emergency Communication Districts Association, or MECTA. Nathan Kaiser with Lubbock ECD, and Patrick Corley with Brazos County 911 ECD, statutory ECDs, and also staffs Heather Barnes and Lorraine Meek. Literally, without those folks' efforts, there wouldn't be a response, because I take all of the efforts from what they do and then jumble them all together and try to make heads or tails out of it with the response. And by the way, our response is posted on our website, so we didn't add it to the notebook itself. There are, and I literally can't tell you how much value placed in those folks. In fact, Commissioner Muscat used to do this for the Alliance, so Mr. Kaiser kind of got thrown into the deep end of the pool this time around, unceremoniously, so he now knows as well what it's like to, hey, don't use this pejoratively, herd the cats, because it does take time. Again, particularly in the municipal areas, because they're not only having to deal with their 911 folks, but they're also having to deal with the city financial people as well, too. And again, going that, we know what a 911 cost is. Your financial person at a city is probably like, what's the difference, right? It's all part of 911, isn't it? But there are a few noteworthy items that they're on page 62. Always kind of try to bullet point those. We didn't get as much of a response as we did in the past years. Capital Area ECD was kind of the biggest outlier, though they did. Mr. Kaiser was able to get their information submitted to us, but it was after I'd already submitted the response to the FCC. Timely basis. And so the cost there, you see, the long and the short of it is the response always shows, and we get good comments from, that 911 fees and revenues are not sufficient to fund 911, literally 911. So that's kind of the recurring theme, and I assure you that the FCC is hearing that from a lot of other jurisdictions as well. And I just would add, to just close this out, there are still, and there have been for several sessions now, 2 bills pending in the current Congress. Granted, it's getting towards the end. There are 2 bills pending. One that would fund $15 billion for next generation, implementation of next generation, and another would $14.8 billion, both of which I believe rely upon the FCC getting renewed authority to do spectrum auctions, and then out of those proceeds, this would be dedicated amounts. I can't tell you where, if at all, these bills were going, but they've been, the 911 caucus has been presenting these bills for several sessions. No guarantees, but with my next item, maybe there is getting progress towards maybe getting some national funding coming down for to implement next generation 911. That is all I have. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about the submission.
Patrick, I have one. So we did have a kind of an uptick in non-responses this go round. And a couple of them are in the area where I live. So if at some point federal funding does come down the pike again, as it has in the past, does that put us in an awkward position that they have not certified when it comes to looking at those funding venues?
That I couldn't readily say. In the act where we had funding that, if you recall, that we received federal grant funding through NHTSA, National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration, that it did tie grant funding to not, I believe, not diverting, but also complying with the FCC's questionnaire. Whether or not and where the funding would come through other bills, I think, whatever federal agency, I don't know if it would link back to, because I'm not so sure if that would come literally through the FCC per se, or entity set up by them. But if it's any way associated, let me just put it that way. If it's in the FCC swim lane, I could see strings being attached to that, tied back to that FCC, what they have to do, report to Congress, for the very obvious reasons. That report to Congress, for the most part, is not only identifying diverting entities, that's one of the purposes, but I think it's also there to denote to Congress is that 911 fees are insufficient in this transition to next generation 911, so that they're looking at that, so coupled together. I could see that they would, but we do a Texas response, so it would be they'd have to carve down into. So the FCC only allows responses to come from the states and jurisdictions. So I don't know what they would honestly do or how they would implement necessarily if, say, one of our cities or one of the COGs or somebody that we literally reported that they were diverting, but the state of Texas, given our 76 entities, was not. I don't know how they would honestly address that.
Okay. All right, sorry, just curiosity there. All right, next item, Patrick, also you, facilitating implementation of the next generation 911 service for the Federal Communication Commission report in order.
Thank you again, Chairman. If you would please turn to page 64. There's a 3-page informational item here as well too. This is really quite exciting. I mean, honestly, if you get excited about FCC orders, but this literally is probably at least arguably, the most significant order that the FCC's released regarding 911 since wireless E911 back several decades ago. Right, that's how important or potentially impactful this can be, and it is a long time in coming. I think it is in no small response to a NASNA, the National Association of 911 Administrators, petition, which the Texas 911 entities were quite instrumental in developing that petition to the FCC, looking for what within our community was kind of a King County decision, which came about in wireless 911 years and years ago, which was part of establishing what the demarcation point would be for OSP, which is originating service provider cost, and 911 cost, which had the cost. Not addressing state or local cost recovery mechanisms, but just identifying the demarcation. So NASNA had filed its petition in 21, but if I recall, the FCC did sought comments about it, and then, in a sense, created their own next generation docket for this. So this report and order, I feel confident, has its roots in that NASNA petition asking for this, and in recognition that by the FCC that they too were looking to put a stake in the ground to transition to next generation. It is very broad in the sense of that their definition of OSPs is, it's right there at the last paragraph on the first page, it's pretty much everybody. Anybody who provides originating and terminating voice communications is pretty well captured by that, including local. So it was reached down into what is state jurisdiction, but at the same time, the FCC also has jurisdiction. We spent a good amount of time in the NASNA petition, the FCC's authority even to reach down into state certificated carriers and in what we call intrastate carriers. So it's very broad, and I'll spare you with the details because that's really relevant for the 911 community and folks, the phase 1 and the phase 2 request. Again, really the key part is that this was a unanimous order that the FCC putting this in the ground. It's been what the states have been clamoring for some time now. And I don't think, and I've kind of spoken with Andrew, who was at NASNA, and Nina, and a few of the folks on staff, and I think it was quite well received. Reviewed it myself, it looks well. It preserves to the states any cost recovery mechanisms. So that's kind of some potential PUC, Public Utility Commission related matters. But overall, it was probably couldn't have asked for anything more. Not that NASNA or anybody was asking for the moon necessarily. They were just literally asking for, we need to transition. We're working with OSPs, many of whom have been quite cooperative and in transitioning to IP, not necessarily because of 911, but just because of their own business models, legacy going away and IP becoming the rigor of what is commonly accepted, et cetera. But that, I could go through kind of more of the details, but it really goes to the phase 1 request, and it's similar to what was done with E911 for wireless, where it's made by request, and the 911 entity authority has to represent and certify that it is capable of receiving the elements and utilizing those elements at each of the phases and is properly connected to a network. Basically, both ends have the responsibilities to do. So I expect we'll be hearing more about how this is impacting transitions. I know our folks have, with our program and also tracking, and that's certainly what SB 8 is the SB 8 funds being used for. So Texas is well on its way. We have 76 911 entities ranging from very, very small, a few 24,000, I think maybe our smallest district, up to Greater Harris County, which is 4+ million. Yeah, there. So you have various levels. Of course, that means various levels of funding as well, too. But that is the extent of I'm happy to answer any questions regarding. This was just a good bellwether day for 911 when the FCC passed this, in particular doing so unanimously.
I have a question. Do you think that the people that have already made requests, once the FCC order is effective, should they make those requests again to ensure that the FCC's timeline applies?
I believe, yes, indeed.
And if they weren't ready, for example, the FCC now requires 2 IP POIs within a state. If they didn't have that at the time they made a request, they probably want to wait till they have that and then make a request.
I would agree. I would agree. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Well, good points. But this kind of resets the clock, doesn't undo past efforts, but it puts that going forward. Here's the process to do to make those requests, including in the certification or being ready for the certifications that 911 has to make.
And also to clarify, there is no FCC requirement for connecting to a legacy network gateway.
That is,
it's strictly connecting via IP.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
And the legacy network gateways, what Commissioner Muscat is referring, those are gateways, and that's why they're literally, as the word says, legacies. So if a non-IP carrier is still allowed and the FCC recognized the continuation that may be still utilization, of what we call LNGs, legacy network gateways, for those TDM, time division multiplexing, legacy type carriers to get their 911 calls into the 911 network. But through the gateway, it comes in as a traditional TDM and then gets converted too. So that's what those gateways are. In a full IP, what we call I3 next generation solution, the gateways go away. The FCC recognized the validity of continuing those as carriers still transition. Did identify that the cost, unless otherwise addressed, the cost would be borne by the OSPs that were utilizing those legacy network gateways.
Any other questions for Patrick? All right. Well,
Thank you,
Patrick,
Commissioners.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Up next, we're on to our 911 service program portion of the agenda, and we have our Hurricane Beryl update from Becky.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Becky Cooley. I am the 911 Technical Program Manager. This report is to provide a summary of the impacts on the emergency communications caused by Hurricane Beryl earlier this month. Prior to the storm's landfall, CSEC began monitoring the storm's path. Staff attended daily preparation calls hosted by FEMA and the Texas Department of Emergency Management, called TDEM, to prepare for the storm's impact and plan for necessary resources. CSAC staff originally contacted agencies along the coast from the U.S. border to just north of Corpus Christi, as it appeared the storm would make landfall near the Texas-Mexico border. As the past storms became clear, staff contacted the 911 authorities from Corpus to the Louisiana border, offering any assistance necessary to escalate issues and outages or provide resources from federal or state agencies. Post-landfall, CSEC staff continued daily calls with FEMA and TDEM. Staff also coordinated with federal and state partners, including CISA, FCC, DHS, and Texas DPS. By establishing a connection with the 911 authorities prior to the storm's landfall, CSEC staff was able to successfully escalate issues for several service providers during the days following the storm. Regarding 911 services and the impact statewide, prior to landfall, CSEC was notified that Refugio Sheriff's Office preemptively evacuated after mandatory evacuation was declared by a local elected official. The 911 calls for the entire county were rerouted to B County Sheriff's Office. Service returned to normal operation 12 hours later, but prior to Barrel's landfall. In the coastal Bend region, call delivery was impacted at 10 PSAPs due to circuit failures from ongoing power issues in Houston. Calls were either transferred to another PSAP or delivered on the admin line. Approximately 15 PSAPs lost commercial power during this time, but remained operational on generator backup. A few PSAPs in the East Texas region were impacted as the storm continued the path north up the state line. One EZNet provider had call delivery impacted with calls delivered to admin lines. This was attributed to continued power-related issues impacting circuits carrying traffic for carriers and OSPs. Some 911 traffic was unable to be delivered to the core and instead was routed to admin lines to the affected PSAPs. The other major EZNet provider in the state was not affected. The biggest impact was to Matagorda County Sheriff's Office. The PSAP is not in the state program, but staff received updates from the 911 director at Gulf Coast ECD throughout the event to pass along updates to federal and state partners. The biggest issue with call delivery was due to a central office being flooded in Matagorda County. Staff also assisted with this escalation of service provider. Separately, the poison control program was impacted by power issues in the Houston area. Connectivity to the Poison Center in Temple is provided by Lumen. Because of the issues with Lumen's two main offices in Houston, the circuits in Temple failed. SPIs were able to continue to work remotely, and the 5 other centers were not impacted, and no calls were lost during this circuit outage. CSEC staff will continue to work with RPCs on effectively and efficiently reporting all outages to coordinate with TDM. Staff will also work with ECDs regarding standardizing outage reports during disasters in an effort to better coordinate resources with federal and state partners. This is informational only, no actions required. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Becky? Good job, Becky.
Thanks.
I would say this, as you look at what happened there, and it doesn't matter whether you're in the city of Portland or you're the Montgomery ECD or COGS or our program staff here. When you look at what happened in that hurricane, I think there's a great story about 911 in the resiliency and the redundancy of the network and the architecture that goes into it. And so a lot of us don't understand every aspect of what Patrick was talking about earlier. And you don't have to, because what you see is how this system operated, and even where there were problems, they got fixed, as opposed to maybe electric service in the Houston area. And so that redundancy, that resiliency, I know it's something y'all work on every day as parts of these programs, and it pays off, and it's great. So congratulations. Good job. All right, we'll move on. Jessica, you're up with the final Regional Planning Commission compliance assessments for fiscal year 2023.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Jessica McLemore, 911 Program Manager. Please turn to page 67 in your notebooks for the FY23 final compliance assessments. Each year, the Commission concludes its monitoring of the Regional Planning Commissions with an end-of-the-year compliance assessment. Monitoring activity provides Commission staff with information and data necessary to best assist the RPCs in implementing and strengthening the 911 system in Texas. With the conclusion of the annual monitoring activities, staff can report the following information. Of the 20 RPCs, 12 were initially classified as low risk, 5 as moderate risk, and 3 as high risk. All RPCs were able to demonstrate improvement and lower their final assessment scores. Individual risk assessment scores are available on page 68 of your notebooks. Commission staff recommends the Commission accept and approve the final FY23 compliance risk assessments for each RPC as provided in this report.
Questions? If not, we'd entertain a motion to approve.
Van Steenberg will make the motion.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Scroll seconds.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed say no.
Aye.
There you go. Jessica, you're up again with the Regional Planning Commission Strategic Plan Amendments request to amend and approve strategic plans.
Please turn to page 69 in your notebooks for the request to amend a strategic plan. Staff are in receipt of 7 requests to amend and approve strategic plan for FY24. Concho Valley is requesting to implement a wireless backup network. They're also requesting to purchase text to 911 translation services for their PSAPs. East Texas is requesting to procure a consultant contract in anticipation of changes in NGCS providers and their CHE vendor. Golden Crescent is requesting to complete a PSAP remodel at Goliad County Sheriff's Office. Rio Grande is requesting to enter into a GIS database maintenance agreement with 2 counties. Laredo is requesting to continue to pay for public education billboards and purchase additional specialty items, and they are also requesting to purchase higher resolution aerial imagery. While the RPCs have funding available within their budget to accommodate their requests, the activities weren't approved by the Commission in their strategic plan. Staff have evaluated the amendment request and determined that they comply with Commission rules and policies and are cost-effective and appropriate in the provisioning of 911 service. Staff recommend that the Commission approve the request to amend the strategic plans as presented using existing allocated funding. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Jessica? If not, we would entertain a motion.
Washington, motion to approve the amendment of the strategic plans.
Super deal. Is there a second?
Muscat seconds.
All right. Way to go, Richard. He got his motion for the day. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. The ayes have it. All right. Moving on. Jessica, up again. Regional Planning Commission Strategic Plan Amendments.
Please turn to page 79 for the request to shift budget authority. Staff are in receipt of 1 request to amend approved strategic plan to shift budget authority for FY23 and 3 requests for FY24. Staff have evaluated the amendment request and determined that they comply with Commission rules and policies and are cost-effective and appropriate in the provisioning of 911 service. Staff recommends that the Commission approve the request to amend strategic plans to shift budget authority as presented in the staff report and authorize its executive director to revise and execute with the affected RPCs the recipient 911 cost summary. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Jessica? All right, Richard, this is your chance to make a primary motion as opposed to just seconding. Come on, buddy.
Motion to approve.
Woo, there you go.
I
Is there
will
a second?
I'll second.
Chip seconds that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. The ayes have it. I just don't want you getting left out, Richard. You know more about this than a lot of us, so there you go. Jessica, you're up again with the Regional Planning Commission Strategic Plan Amendments and a request to implement change to 911 service arrangement.
Yes, sir. Please turn to page 85 in your notebooks. The East Texas Council of Governments is requesting to amend its strategic plan to change 911 service arrangements. The request is to change next-gen core service providers from AT&T to NGA. ETCOG has met the requirements outlined in Rule 251.2 and PPS 39. However, there are milestones that have not been met yet due to timing that ETCOG will be required to complete before their targeted implementation date of February 2026. ETCOG will ensure all required elements of Commission Rule 251.2, including the vendor requirements in 251.2D, have been or will be met prior to the implementation date, including all information listed in the staff report. This plan amendment was accompanied by 2 separate but concurrent requests for $714,981 in general revenue to cover early transition costs. These requests for additional funding have been since rescinded at ETCOG's request. The rescinded requests to cover early transition costs related to the change in 911 service arrangements are $117,030 for ESINet and core functions build-out, $180,428 for early termination fees for AT&T's current service contract, and $417,523 for replacement of call handling equipment. ETCOG was informed that these costs were unallowable for the FY24-25 budget cycle, but the ESINet and core functions cost and the replacement of their call handling equipment may be eligible in the FY26-27 biennium. ETCOG stated that they will cover the ineligible expenses from their local fund if necessary, though they may also consider submitting future requests for initial funding. Staff recommend the Commission approve ECOG's request to amend its strategic plan to implement a change in 911 service arrangement as presented. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a comment. I think ECOG has clearly met the requirements of the rule for having an orderly transition, but I would like to make a motion that we clarify in approving that, if we vote to approve that, that we're not addressing any additional funding on the agency from that, because they mentioned they might come back, and I wouldn't want them to come back and say, well, why'd you approve it if there wasn't going to be funding? So just to be clear, they met the requirements that they asked for today.
Yes, that's correct. There's no fiscal impact to the state program or the agency in approving this service change as presented.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I know David's here. Did you have anything you wanted to say, or?
No, sir, I'm just here to support the cause. I'm here to respond to any questions, though, if you have it, and I'm glad to be with you in your new digs, for sure.
Thank you, sir. All right. Any further questions for Jessica then? See, Patrick, I was proactive in making sure I wasn't missing a public comment. I want a gold star for that. If not, then we would entertain a motion on this item.
Muscat, motion to approve the change with the caveat that there's no financial impact.
Scruggs seconds.
There's a motion and a second. Any of those, or all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. The ayes have it.
Thank you.
All right. Up next is Heather with Program Policy Statement. Consideration of a revised PPS for number 8 on regional plan amendments.
Told you I'd be back. Again, for the record, my name is Heather Barnes, Director of Programs. If you would please turn to page 88. Program Policy Statement 008 outlines the process that RPCs must follow when requesting amendments to their approved strategic plans. The proposed changes streamline the PPS, clarify staff's role during the review process, and delegate authority to the Executive Director for administrative amendments, namely budget shifts and plan amendments where there's no additional funds being requested. In accordance with PPS 000, we have a PPS on how to do PPS. Staff collaborated with TARC and the RPC 911 Program Operations Advisory Group to review PPS 008. The parties agree on the changes presented. Commission staff recommends that the Commission vote to adopt revised PPS 008 regional plan amendments accompanying the staff report.
All right. Any questions for Heather? This is a landmark day for her. She took 2 reports, made it into one, and now they're streamlining the regional plan amendments. Now, Bobby Mitchell looked like she was going to make a motion earlier, so we're going to give her a minute, see if she wants to make this one.
Thank you. I move that the Commission vote to adopt revised PPS 008 regional plan amendments accompanying this staff report.
Super. Is there a second?
Muscat seconds.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. The ayes have it. Good job, Heather. She's up again for another PPS for consideration of revised PPS number 28 on equipment replacement.
Yes, that'll be on page 95. PPS 28 establishes requirements and procedures for RPCs on equipment replacement. The proposed changes, again, streamline the PPS, clarify definitions, and update reimbursement limits for recorders and generators to account for recent inflation. In accordance with PPS 000, staff collaborated with TARC and the advisory group to review the PPS. The parties agree on the changes presented, and Commission staff recommends that the Commission vote to adopt revised PPS 028, equipment replacement, accompanying the staff report.
Any questions for Heather? If not, we would entertain a motion to approve the updates of PPS number 28.
Guerrero motions to adopt the revised PPS 028.
Van Steenberg, second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. The ayes have it. Heather, good job. All right, we're back to Patrick. For rulemaking, consider for publication initiating the annual review of Commission Rule 255.4, the definition. Really, did we not deal with this like 3 months ago? I mean, my God.
Seems like it.
There you go.
If you would, Commissioners, please turn to page 102. Again, Patrick Tyler, your General Counsel. This is an annual review, as the Chairman just acknowledged. This is an annual review that the Commission does to review the definitions as required by Health and Safety Code Section 771063. That's our enabling statute. The Commission's definition is applicable throughout the state, so our definition of local exchange access line or equivalent is applicable to all ECD areas, so it's statewide, so that it's important there. We have not revised the rule since 2005 when voice over IP and 911 became a requirement, so we revised it then. Staff is not proposing any changes to the rule at this time, but we do have to put it out for notice and comment in case the public has any proposed changes too. I've been noting for the last few years here, the last paragraph in the status section about potentially disruptive changes in technology. Those still could come about. Nothing has come up on the surface to the equivalent of VoIP where we need to be proactive about those. But if I just keep putting that there, because one day there may be. With that, I would recommend that the Commission initiate the annual review of 255.4 by approving the company notice for publication and comment in the Texas Register. That notice is on page 103. Thank you.
Any questions for Patrick? Is there a motion?
Muscat, motion to approve.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Mitchell, second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. The ayes have it. All right, we're going to move on to our poison control program. And I know the program says James was going to be up here, but it's actually going to be Heather for our Regional Poison Control Center Strategic Plan Amendment and Request to Shift Budget Authority for fiscal year 2024.
I told you, he's making me get in my steps. Again, I'm Heather Barnes, Director of Programs. Please turn to page 106. Staff is in receipt of one request to amend and approve strategic plan to shift budget authority for FY24 for North Texas Poison Center. Staff has evaluated the amendment request and determined that it complies with Commission rules and policies and is cost-effective and appropriate for poison services. Staff recommends that the Commission approve the request to amend a strategic plan to shift budget authority as presented in the staff report.
Any questions? Do I hear a motion?
Guerrero makes a motion to approve as presented.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Washington, second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. The ayes have it. All right, Kenneth, you're up for the medical reference and drug interaction software.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Kenneth Mays. I am the Contract Administrative Manager that works under Noah Gilliam in the Procurement Division. This item is found on page 109 of your notebook. CSEC staff is seeking to procure a medical reference and drug interaction software. This software provides the Texas Poison Control Network with access to valuable information. This information includes, but is not limited to, pharmaceutical information on drug identification, packaging information, international formulations, occupational safety sheets, and safety in pregnancy. This software must be able to be hosted on the Texas Poison Control Network and have a 24/7, 365 supported based version. CSEC currently utilizes Micromedics for meets these requirements. CSEC also believes Micromedics is a proprietary software. Staff recommends that the Commission authorize and delegate the authority to its Executive Director to procure and award a contract for medical reference and drug interaction software in support of the Texas Poison Control Network. Do you have any questions?
Any questions? All right, well, if not, then I guess we would entertain a motion.
Mitchell move as staff recommended.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second, Van Steenberg.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. The ayes have it.
Thank you, sir.
All right, Heather, you're back up for program policies, another PPS. God love you. Consideration of revised PPS 109 user access to the TPCN Information Resources System.
For the record, I'm turning on the microphone. My name is Heather Barnes, Director of Programs. PPS 109 outlines, please turn to page 111. You'd think I'd have this down by now. PPS 109 outlines the controls and verification for users' access to the Texas Poison Control Network. The proposed changes clarify and update the resources provided to the RPCCs, outline the requirements for the data use agreement for all users accessing the TPCN, and provide for programmatic assessment actions by Commission staff when reviewing requests for new users. In accordance with PPS 100, so we actually have two PPS that tell us what to do with PPS. Staff collaborated with the RPCCs through the Poison Control Coordinating Committee to seek input on the proposed changes to PPS 109 accompanying this report. Commission staff recommends that the Commission vote to adopt revised PPS 109 user access to TPCN information resource systems accompanying the staff report. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Heather? 3 PPSs, that's pretty good. All right, then we would entertain a motion.
Van Steenberg will make the motion to approve the changes.
All right, Clint, you in? You got a second?
Yes. So
All right.
seconded.
Clint's going to say, I didn't want you to get
Fall
left
in there,
out.
right?
All right. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. It is unanimous. All right, we're up to our last point on the agenda, which is our Poison Control Coordinating Committee presentation update on fentanyl exposures. Jeannie, oh, there she is.
All right, good morning. My name is Jeannie Shawhart, and I'm the co-chair of the Poison Center Coordinating Committee for the Texas Poison Center Network. And if you will turn to page 116, Heather had asked that we present some information on our fentanyl cases.
Did you bring samples? Oh, no, never mind. We don't want that.
Okay, I'm not going to read this all to y'all, but basically the Poison Network gets two kinds of calls on fentanyl. Some are the prescription fentanyl, which is usually patches. Kids often dig these out of the trash and get exposed to them. And the other kind of fentanyl is the one that's creating all the chaos, and that's the illicit fentanyl. What's occurring with the illicit fentanyl is that people are going and trying to buy Percocets on the drug market. Percocet has oxycodone and acetaminophen in it, but the dealers are mixing fentanyl in with this. And in some cases, it has no oxycodone and just has fentanyl, acetaminophen, or fillers. So the buyers do not know they're getting fentanyl. They just think they're getting illegal Percocets. And that's created a huge issue across the United States. Fentanyl is 100 times more potent than morphine. And just to go on to the role of our centers, so we take calls daily on fentanyl, and all of our cases are loaded to the National Poison Data System on a near real-time basis, so about every 7 minutes. So the CDC monitors this system, DSHS does as well, and they look for trends or an outbreak. Some of you may have heard of the outbreak in Austin a couple months ago, about 50 exposures in 2 days, I think 6 deaths. So we monitor for things like this to see if a bad batch has gotten out there or a batch with excessive fentanyl. The poison centers then provide treatment recommendations to healthcare facilities who call about cases. The challenges with our data and what we get with the Poison Center is that some patients die before they even get to the hospital. So fentanyl is an opioid. It causes respiratory depression and respiratory arrest if they get too much, so they stop breathing. So they're often found not breathing with no heart rate. So if that patient dies before they go to the hospital, before a call is made to the poison center, we don't capture that. It's never reported to us. Also, as I mentioned earlier, fentanyl is being mixed with all kinds of illegal drugs. It's being mixed with heroin, cocaine, MDMA, even marijuana in some cases. But again, the buyers do not know this. So if they go to the hospital or they're taken by ambulance to the hospital, they do not say, I took fentanyl. They might say, I bought some Percocets or I used heroin. So it's very difficult to actually, for us to document a fentanyl exposure because the user doesn't know they got fentanyl to report. Additionally, the hospitals don't typically test for fentanyl because it doesn't change the treatment. If somebody's not breathing, you intubate them and start breathing for them. You give them Narcan to help them breathe. It doesn't really matter if it was fentanyl or oxycodone or hydrocodone. So financially, there's no good reason to do additional testing. However, the state does have some grants, I believe, that are looking into getting some testing done so we would have more data. The next slide, we report 136 fentanyl exposure cases have been documented this year from January to May. This is a drop in the bucket because hospitals are not required to report cases to the poison centers. So many of them don't. They're handling a patient with respiratory depression. That's pretty easy for a healthcare provider to treat. They don't necessarily feel like they need recommendations on how to get somebody breathing again. So they may not report this to the poison centers. For those reasons, our cases are much, much smaller than what's really occurring out there. We do have one reported death, 40 major effects. These are usually like CNS depression, respiratory depression, hypotension, very low blood pressure. And again, I already mentioned the limitations there. The next slide is a graph showing the numbers of cases. And this is where I think poison center data does come in pretty valuable because you can see that steep rise that's occurred with the biggest increase from 22 to 23. It looks like we have a dip in 24. Please note that's because we've only reported January through May. This is likely going to continue that same steep increase that we saw in 2023. So in conclusion, our data is comparable to other sources in showing the trends. From 2018 to 23, our poison network experienced an increase of 463% in fentanyl exposures, with that greatest single year increase occurring in 22 to 23. We can't use our poison center data alone to get a good picture of what's going on with fentanyl. It's a critical piece, but it also has to be used with health department data, death records, and things of that sort to get a good picture of what's going on. What questions do you have?
The calls that you're getting, are there a lot of medical calls or are they really more just general calls? And the reason I'm asking that is because I think a lot of people don't know they're taking fentanyl because they don't literally know that it's being slipped in. And then a lot of the people that have consumed it, it's pretty down and out quick. So I was just kind of curious what those phone calls that you're getting are like.
Yeah, they're usually from an emergency room. So a nurse calling and reporting that they have a patient whose drug screen's positive for opioids. Depending on how much they got, they may have already been intubated or on a ventilator. So that I would say is the majority of our cases, aside from the ones that are from the patches, which are used for severe pain, bone pain, cancer pain. We do still see those as well. But we do not really get information calls on fentanyl. They're all exposures.
Okay, so it's medical calls.
Yes.
Okay.
Good. So the calls that we get coming, I guess I'm wondering why is it in there to begin with? Am I understanding this right, that there's the Percocet, it's been slipped in there, it's made to look like Percocet, but it's not?
Right. So these clandestine drug labs, they make these, sometimes in barns, I mean, you name it. And they mix powder with fentanyl, and then they might have a stick to stir it up. So, and then they use a pill press, which you can buy from probably Amazon. So they use a pill press and they put the imprint code M30 on that to make it look like it's a Percocet. So the buyers think, oh, I may be buying it on the black market, but this is prescription Percocet, so it's going to be okay. They don't realize, or they don't understand that it's not real prescription grade, pharmaceutical grade Percocet. And that fentanyl powder, when they put it in there, there may be a whole lot of powder over in this part of the batch and none in this part. So if somebody gets a pill that came out of this part, it can kill them. And that's where DEA's campaign, One Pill Can Kill, has come from. If they get a pill from this side, they may get no fentanyl at all.
So the question is it's hard to even ask this question. Why are people buying it to start with? I mean, initially, fentanyl is a pain reliever if it's, I guess, legally generated. But are we seeing people that are trying to get high, trying to have that feeling? Is that why they're purchasing it?
They're
purchasing. That's some illicit thing happening to where we have an intent to kill.
I don't believe there's an intent to kill. There's an intent to get people addicted. So the dealers, let's say they're trying to make Percocets, they believe that putting fentanyl in there creates a more desirable drug with a higher high or a better high. And so users are seeking out those Percocets. They're not necessarily saying, I want to find some fentanyl. They're saying, I want some Percocets, some oxycodone, because I can get a really good high from that. And then they go purchase it, and there happens to be fentanyl in it. So the users, in most cases, have no idea they're getting fentanyl.
One other question. Do you know of any state or national legislation or push to have healthcare facilities check for fentanyl so that we can really get the kind of accurate numbers we all seek?
There are some grants out that are starting to provide for testing, and then some hospitals are already including fentanyl testing in their drug screens, but they're not all of them. I would say maybe 10%. And that makes it hard for us because when they call, they don't say, oh, we have a fentanyl overdose. We just don't know. We have to treat them all the same. But yes, that's a good direction to go. There is some legislation on the national level to try and get some of the pathways for the ingredients stopped. So the ingredients are coming from China, sometimes from Mexico. So they're trying to stop the importation. So there are some measures that are being taken place there too.
Thank you.
Well, kind of based on what you've said, Jeannie, really what it comes down to. So you've got what y'all are reporting here. Different hospitals may or may not have that data. So whatever we're seeing is probably worse just because we don't really have the ability to consolidate that data.
Right. I would say what we're seeing at the Poison Center, it's the problem is probably 100 times worse. Because we're seeing such a little amount of the exposures. But I think the trends, the increases year over year are representative. They're going to be consistent with some of the other databases that have information.
And so you said the 2024 numbers that are in the packet here, where you see that little dip, are January through May.
Yes.
So by the time we add that up, just where we're at that point, it'll be a significant increase again this year over last year.
Yes, I think it will be probably close to 300 for this year.
Okay.
I guess I'm shocked that there's one death in all of this. I mean,
and again, that's just reflective of our limitations, because many of these patients, because it makes them stop breathing, so they're dead when they are found. So those calls don't ever come to us. So it's not that they're not happening; it's that they're not being reported to the Poison Center, because we're basically providing treatment recommendations. If the patient's already gone, they don't need to call us. That's where the Texas Health Department death records would come in really handy.
well, thank you.
All right, thank y'all.
Thank you, Jeannie.
You're welcome.
All right. I don't think we have anything else to come before us today, so this will conclude our commission open meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Or you will make that motion?
There you go. Is there a second? There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Well, the time is 11:30 and we are adjourned.